Welcome to the ITSP Magazine Podcast Network. You are about to listen to the Soulful CXO podcast with Dr. Rebecca Wynn. These conversations focus on the intersection of technology, business, and humanity, exploring how these three areas impact each other. Dr. Wynn interviews guests, including business leaders, entrepreneurs, and experts in various fields, to share insights and experiences on cybersecurity, risk management, and leadership. The podcast aims to provide a fresh perspective on how technology can be leveraged to create positive change in the world. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Soulful CXO. I'm your host, Dr. Rebecca Wynn. We are pleased to have with us today Jo Peterson. Jo is the award-winning VP of Cloud and Security Services for Clarify 360, the founding co-chair for Cloud Girls, a not-for-profit community of female technology advocates, a U.S. Air Force veteran, and serves on numerous advisory boards. She is recognized as an industry thought leader and influencer, being named one of Oracle's top 15 people to follow in cybersecurity and one of Analytica's top cloud influencers. Additionally, she speaks regularly at industry conferences, contributes to industry publications, and hosts webinars for Bright Talk. Jo, my friend, it's so great to see you again.
Thank you so much. I think the only thing that you forgot, Dr. Rebecca, is I post cat videos on cybersecurity on the regular.
That is true. I'm a dog person, but I like those cat cartoons as well, too.
How's your day today?
It's going great. It's going great. Hey, how did you even get started in this crazy field, cybersecurity? Did you always want to be in cybersecurity, even like when you went to college and things along those lines?
So mine was more of a journey. I'm of a certain age, and there weren't a lot of female engineers, honestly, for me to take a look at. And so I went in the military, and I had the opportunity to work on electronic equipment. And part of, if you know anything about the military, they're wonderful about getting you college credits for things. So I was able to parlay my military time and the learning that I had there, the tech school that I went to, into college credits at the University of Maryland. And I was able to take some very early computer classes when networks were really flat and dinosaurs walked the earth. I think it was the same sort of time of things. And so when I get out of the military, I was lucky enough to get a job at a telco as an engineer. So I came up the network side of the house. And then in 2009, after I'd had a number of different roles over the years, I really took a liking to cloud computing. I got in super early, and I was doing architecture work for cloud. And what I realized in really short order was folks weren't preparing their cloud environment to include security. And so I would go back to them and I'd be like, okay, so I'm not a security person, but how are you going to secure this? And they would be like, the same way we secure the on-premises. It was early days. It was very Wild Westy, right? And people were like, we're going to secure it the same way we do the on-premises environment. Or I'd get an answer, oh, the cloud provider takes care of all that for us. And I'd be like, no. And so I got super familiar with the shared responsibility model, even before it was known as the shared responsibility model. And so I felt like it was my imperative to go to my client and go, gee, so they're going to take care of this, but they expect you to take care of that thing over there. Basically, your data is yours and it's yours to secure. And they'd be like, it was like news to them. I really got interested in learning about what I could do from the perspective of helping clients think through these architectures and these environments. And when one set of security controls just stopped working for you because it was in a completely different plane, as it were. So that's what happened to me over time. And I feel really blessed because of the fact that I do have a really good foundational understanding of the plumbing of the environment. And I think now we're starting to see that as we come into the time of AI, cloud is a foundational vehicle. So if you don't have cloud, you're not going to oftentimes be able to take advantage of AI and all the wonderful benefits of AI. So that's probably a really windy answer, but that's what happened to me.
We want to thank you for your service. I appreciate you serving in the Air Force.
Yeah. It was a good experience. And I think that you and I were chatting about this a little bit. It's, if you can hire somebody from a military background, I'm going to give a little plug to the vets out there. There's someone that transfers a lot of the ethics and a lot of the discipline that they learn being part of a team to your team. So the military's already started to train them as a person that has to be part of a team and respond as part of a team and show up on time and follow a chain of command and all the wonderful things that the military teaches them. And so hire a vet. That's my plug.
I agree with you. I think one of the things too is being agile, fluid, being able to take on a multiple different tasks, being able to switch tasks very quickly. So the project management standpoint, understanding that policies and procedures and checklists are there for a reason. They're used, if they're in cybersecurity, being a vet as well too, or networking, they're used to using this checklist as well as different security technical implementation guides. That part you don't have to explain to them. They're used to also dealing with incidents, business continuity, and they're trained along those lines. So they're also good team leaders, thought leaders along those lines. And so I tell people, always pay attention when you have a vet and really look at those resumes. I always do, and look and see if there's any of those cross skills that even if they can't be used directly in your team, there's probably more likely going to be another team in your organization that they'll line up very well and then be a good business partner with you over on cybersecurity.
Yeah, that's a good point. The military teaches these young men and women coming in leadership skills because they want to groom them for positions of leadership. And so, unlike maybe someone else who is their chronological age and maybe didn't have all the responsibility that this young person has in the military, just if they're going to college and they just haven't had all that responsibility, all that life seasoning yet. There's an acceleration that occurs in terms of maturity and leadership skills for these young vets that are coming out of the service.
I think it's really challenging today where we do have a lot of technology people who were laid off last year and the year before. And don't forget that there were small, middle-sized companies that had layoffs as well as the big companies that got all the press. And what people find when they're trying to get into a new role, a lot of times companies say, I only want somebody who was in healthcare and you were in a different sector. Maybe you're in technology, maybe you're in financial services, maybe you're in pharma. And so I won't look at you. I think people are missing out on a lot of great pockets out there, great talent because they're being too narrow in their mindset.
I hadn't thought about it in exactly those terms. I guess the thing that I think about is I am so encouraged by the coming together of disciplines. I've been doing this a long time. I know you've been doing this a long time. You're a seasoned technology person, as I am. And for the longest time, we saw silos. And I feel like some of the silos are breaking down. If you were on the network team, you never talked to the security guys. If you were a security guy, you never talked to the network team, right? But now we have, network security people, which is wonderful. If you were on the dev team, you didn't cross over with the security guys. Now we have DevSecOps, right? So we have these coming together of functional units. And a lot of times in the bigger organizations, if they've got the personnel because they have deeper benches, they'll have somebody that's the liaison between the two teams, which is awesome because they make decisions as a team. So they consider what are the needs of the business overarchingly, but what are the needs of the network? I have this going on with a large chemical client right now. What are the needs of the security team? How can we put those together and make it work for everybody? So that's been a really cool thing that's happened. And so if that's a great way, I tell people, okay, maybe there's not a job open on the security team, but maybe be forward and put yourself up and say, hey, do we need a liaison? Do we need somebody from the network team to be a liaison for the security team? Get to know those people. Get to know what their challenges are. Volunteer. They tell you the military never volunteer, but it's probably not a bad thing for someone who's looking to cross over. Because at the end of the day, and you know this, Dr. Rebecca, team leaders are people and they hire people that they like. They have to have the skill set, but it has to be somebody that they feel like would fit in with the rest of the team. That they feel
that's
like,
tough.
Yeah, that they feel like the person would be a fit. So if you make an effort, you might stand a better chance of getting yourself, maybe it's a lateral move, but maybe it's into security, an area that you haven't been in before, which is important.
I think that's also a challenge, right? I tell people to be very cautious about hiring people in a team solely for team fit, because people flip out of a job pretty quickly anymore in today's world. Leadership changes. So look at those skill sets a little bit more at times than just if I like them as a person. And the one way I see that comes in on females is there's a lot of teams out there that, let's face it, their majority of them, vast majority are male. And so at times they may think and see things a little differently. And by hiring women onto the team, you will see a different perspective. What do you find that as a challenge too? I know that you mentor a lot of women out there, and a lot of young women and women trying to get into the field. And I would tell them, even seasoned people like me, 99.99% of the time when I've lost out a CISO role has not been to another female.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I can count the number of female CISOs that I know on my hand today, and they're all awesome, by the way. And what I love about them is that they hire women underneath them. They give other women a chance. Not that the guys don't, because, and I'm going to say this, my best bosses have been guys. So let me just put that out there. I've been lucky enough to have bosses that advocated for me and believed in me and gave me a chance. And those happen to be men. So there's great male leaders out there that encourage females, right? But I don't know what the latest number is. I saw something last year that said maybe 12 to 15% of the cyber workforce is female. Am I tracking right with my stat there?
Yeah, you are.
Okay. So if you think about it, that's a really low number. So I know that some of even the guy CISOs that I've had conversations with, they want to get women onto their teams, but they say to me, look, the talent's just not out there. And I don't know what the answer is. What do you think the answer is?
I think one way trying to go in the proper front door to get these positions, you see a job that's posting, you put a resume out there, it has to go through ATS and it has to go through someone in HR and things along those lines. I think with all the AI reading through the resumes, they're dropping a lot of the great resumes. We can talk about it's best to know people in the organization so you can put your name up. But the one thing I know that when I'm hiring roles, I ask them, I go, I want to see all the ones you rejected. I would take consistently in the rejection pile is where I find that people who I want to hire for my team, or I say they'd be a great fit for operations over here. We're looking for this, or they'll be a great person over here in the DevOps sec team over here. And so I tell people that's where AI and ATS systems have failed. And then the other thing you have, just warning people out there, is you have people who are using platforms out there that will help you tweak your resume to meet exact job description. And if the people aren't using that, these other people look like they are your top candidates, maybe for that position, when they're not. They're the people who knew how to fool the system. And I won't get into, is that good? Is that bad? And all that other kind of stuff. But I tell people, so if you're going to do that, you really should maybe think about, am I going to spend more time to have people like looking out at LinkedIn and some of these other platforms to see who are being the thought leaders, who are talking about a lot of things, and then reaching out to them saying, hey, are you potentially open? That's one thing I think that AI has done a disservice, is because you can fool AI, you can make them look like you have experience where you don't, so you can get in the door and it can be used to drop great candidates. That's one thing I see that's going on consistently.
Yeah, and you're sparking something as you're chatting with me, something that comes to mind. Shout out to my friend and tech leader, Janet Shines. She taught me a lesson. Janet is a very successful business person now. She used to be the vice president at Verizon Wireless. And she said to me, Jo, you've got to encourage young women to apply. And I said, what do you mean? What's the problem? And she said, the problem is they disinclude themselves. Young women, unlike young men, and you probably know this, but I want someone to hear this. I'm hoping some young woman out there hears this. They look at a job description and a woman thinks unless she has everything listed in that job description, she doesn't apply. And a young man will look at the job description and think a completely different way. He'll be like, I got 50% of it. I can learn the rest on the job. A completely different mindset. So we as females disinclude ourselves. We don't even apply for jobs that we don't have everything perfectly that they're asking for. And who knows who wrote that job description? Maybe it's pie in the sky to begin with. Maybe a junior security person would never have all those certs that they were asking for example, right? But somebody in HR said, oh, that sounds good. Let's include that because that'd be a bonus if they have it. But do they really need it today to do the job? No, probably not. But that kind of stuff happens all the time. So if a young woman is out there listening to this, I want to encourage her to take a chance and apply. And I loved your idea about reaching out to other women on LinkedIn that you think are just cool. I'll send a female CISO an invite. I apologize, female CISOs in advance, but I think you're cool. And I send you invites sometimes because I think you're cool. So there's really nothing wrong with being like #nerd and fangirling them. Because they're like, to me, if they've made it that high up they're amazing. So I want to know them.
The one thing I always say is, I always tell my HR is that if there is any woman's resume that comes in for the position, now watch me next time I have 10,000 of them. And I said, I want to see them. And then a lot of times, even though they don't fit the position, I said, can you set up a 25, 30-minute conversation with them? Just say, you're not a right person for this role, but Rebecca is willing to go ahead and speak with you for a half hour, 45 minutes, just to go ahead and to see what you're looking for and see if she might be able to help you get to that best opportunity. And I encourage other women out there to do that. And even if you are not a woman, you're a man and you're looking for a position, I encourage you, just for the greater good, randomly go ahead and pick maybe 5 people out of the pool who were rejected because they didn't meet the requirements, and go ahead and meet with them. I try to do that all the time. You can't do it 24/7 because you do have to earn a living, but I encourage people out there that as people are applying for jobs, they're doing so for reasons. They want to make some sort of core change in their life. And if you can, pay it forward and look at the pool that did not make the cut. And even if it's just a random draw, see if you can go ahead and meet with a couple of people and help them out on a mentorship. Because I mentor, I know you mentor as well. And I think it's important going forward that we consistently do that in the world, not just our profession, but in the world.
That's a lovely thought. It's a little chunk of time, of your time. And I always think about the fact that somebody held their hand out for me and gave me a chance, right? Because I was unlike the other candidates in the pool. I was telling my friend the other day, I have a picture of myself in an early engineering role. And at the time, I'm going to date myself here, but all the guys wore white or blue long sleeve shirts to work. So you can figure out what year it was, but that was the time. And I forgot we were having a picture. So all the engineers had gathered and I had worn a bright pink top. And because I was the only female, they stuck me in the center of the picture. And I literally, Dr. Rebecca, looked like a sore thumb. I was literally and figuratively the sore thumb. And I think about that sometimes because nobody else looked like me, right? I'm just saying I know there were other female engineers, but it was way before social media. And we were lucky to have email addresses at that time. And I didn't know anybody else like me then.
Well, it's still a bit that way. And one thing I encourage everybody to remember is each and every one of us are a unique being. And so really go ahead and sit down and what are the unique skill sets that you bring. So when you go ahead and get into these positions, it's easy at times to feel like you're an imposter. Should you belong? You should belong. And if they don't make you feel like you belong and you have value, shame on them. I always tell people they're probably not going to change. And I know this is contrary to HR, but if they're really not going to change and that environment's not good for you, go ahead and see what lessons that you've learned, appreciate the lessons you learned, and then move forward to a company that can appreciate you. Today, when we look at cloud, one of the things is it seems like we're having data breach every nanosecond. What do you think is going on there? It seems like security governance, we're behind the curve. We keep being behind. But I keep telling them, if we don't make sure the cloud's secure, the rest doesn't matter as much. But what do you see and what do you think about what's happening right now with security in the cloud?
Let me tell you that I think that teams have become more aware. IT leadership has become more aware. Folks are doing a good job trying to secure their environments, but it's hard. And part of the hard is that the tools are disparate. So if you want to look at one function, you have to log into one tool. And then if you want to look at another function in terms of monitoring, sometimes you have to look into another tool. And then you're expected as an analyst to correlate the data between the two tools and understand. So there's that problem. There's the problem of false positives. So I'd read a study, and I'm going to get the percentage wrong here, but it was high, based upon the gist of it was based upon the number of alerts that a SOC analyst gets. He or she doesn't have time to look at them all. So they just ignore some of them. And the percentage, again, was pretty high, right? So if you're ignoring alerts, is there one in there that's a problem that you've ignored? The third thing is expectation. So we've shifted all these workloads to the cloud, and we have multiple clouds. And we expect one human being to be able to know how to secure all the different environments that we as a company have decided to procure. I want people to understand that every flavor of cloud product, whether it be SaaS, IaaS, PaaS, and every provider, hyperscaler, has different nuances about all these products. My feeling is free up more of the security budget to help these people do their jobs, right? If you look, depending upon the vertical, as a percentage of revenue, an IT team might get 10%, 6 to 10% of the annual revenue of the organization, totally, for all IT projects. Of that 6 to 10%, again, depending upon the vertical and regulatory constraints, the security team gets somewhere between 8 and 12%. So let's make it in English. If you have a $100 million revenue company, then you're going to get 10%, maybe, if you're lucky, 6 to 10% for all of your IT of that total revenue. And then you're only going to get this tiny portion for security. But yet everything is, and more, your brand depends on your security. People don't want to do business. Consumers don't want to do business with somebody that has a bad reputation. It's starting to matter, right? Everything, security is mattering more and more in organizations. So give these folks a little bit more money to do their job. That's what I'm going to put my hand on the table and pound, right? Is like, these IT folks are doing the best that they can. Why do you think we turn CISOs so often? It's too hard. It is what we expect from that one human being. They get burned out. We don't give them the tools that they need. We don't give them the budgets that they need. In some states, they can be criminally prosecuted for not doing their job as it should be, and sometimes it's out of their hands. They cannot affect change. Maybe so reports to the CFO, and the CFO says, you know what? We don't really need that thing that you tell me we need, whatever the thing is. So you've just effectively tied this person's hands, but they're on the hook from a legal perspective. It just gets me a little fired up, honestly.
I've walked away from either consulting gigs or I've walked away from positions before in the past where it's like, there was no way for me to win. There was no way for me to be able to do the job that I was hired to do with all the handcuffs and shackles I was being put upon me. But I had 100% the liability, and I was not going to be in a 6x8 cell, if it's that big, for numerous years because I wasn't able to do the job I was capable of doing, but not getting the support that I was needed to be able to do the job effectively.
They don't get a seat. It's getting better, but they don't get a seat at the table with the board. So they don't get to articulate what they really need, which is problematic. So I think that all, and we've not seen the formal reports come out yet, but the increase in AI-related ransomware attacks is through the roof. What we are seeing is tech firms, security firms in particular, reporting on the percentage growth that has occurred from 22 to 23. And some of it's double digits. And it's in those sweet spots of phishing where we're seeing AI-generated attacks. I'd read the other day that AI can crack an average password in 7 seconds. 7 seconds. I forget what the rest of the stat was, but just an average password in 7 seconds. And then we look at sort of advanced threats, which are coming, which we're starting to see, but we haven't seen yet, like vishing. Okay, vishing, the old days, somebody would target an executive, and right now they can copy their voice. Full stop. They can copy their voice. So all of a sudden you get a phone call and it says, I'm John Jones. This is John Jones, the CEO, and I need you to do this. I need you to reset my password. I've heard him speak. It sounds like him. This is the kind of territory that we're getting into where all the digital media that we believe to be true, like I saw a picture or I heard a voice or, right, is being altered. It's next level stuff that we're going to start seeing happen. So that's pretty scary.
Until it comes on there, what you do is you need to have another way for them to be able to validate that is not necessarily on a known personal system or a known system. We need another way to go ahead and make those communications. And that goes into your business continuity, incident response, really things along those lines as well too. And just because we talked about that, the other thing is, what do you do when we see like the MGM, when we go ahead and we see that, hey, I'm going to go ahead and harm your family if you don't go ahead and give up this credential or something along those lines? Are you handling that as a company as part of your tabletops and things along those lines, how to handle it is to go ahead and say, this event just happened at MGM. Could that have happened to us? And if it would have happened to us, how we would have handled it. So you can take those real life examples that seem to be happening almost on a weekly basis. And are we prepared? And then go ahead and be able to make sure your team knows how you could handle that safely.
That's a really good point. And let me share a tip if I can with your audience, because I encountered this, unfortunately, with a client, but they were savvy enough. So what they did is they did a series of tabletops, different client than the one we just talked about. They wrapped them in an IR blanket. And the reason that they wrapped them in an IR blanket, meaning the commercial vehicle, was then if something occurred, they could utilize the funds that were sitting in there for the tabletop that had been designated for an incident response. And unfortunately, it happened to them. They got hit. And because they had the funds in there, they could initiate a SWAT team to come in and help them right away. They didn't have to worry about getting funds and getting one of the executives to approve the funds. And it was great. If you're able to wrap an IR blanket around a tabletop or whatever other, a pen test, whatever other normal security vehicle that you do, I would encourage you to do it just so that you have that sort of the commercial side of it done, and then you can get the help you need right away. Doesn't matter who you choose, right? But just have it done for yourself, and that give you a little peace of mind.
Oh, that's great. Unfortunately, our time has totally flown by. I want to encourage everybody to read through the descriptions. You'll find all of Jo's contact information. We'll have some additional resources in the resource section as well, too. Please go ahead and make sure you subscribe to the Soulful CXO Insights newsletter. You can do that on LinkedIn. Always like, subscribe, share the show with other people, and leave me comments or reach out to me on LinkedIn on other guests or topics you'd like to listen to. Jo, thank you so much for being on the show. You're an inspiration. Thank you for sharing all your wisdom and your great tips.
Thanks for having me. I had fun today.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Soulful CXO Podcast with Dr. Rebecca Wynn, part of the ITSP Magazine Podcast Network. If you learned something new and this conversation made you think, then add this show to your favorite podcast player. Subscribe to the ITSP Magazine YouTube channel and share the ITSP Magazine Podcast Network with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to connect your brand to our conversations and our audience, visit itspmagazine.com to learn how to sponsor one or more of our shows. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey.